Get in on the action this season with Underdog's Pick'em game. Select higher or lower between 2 and 8 players and compete for up to 325 times your entry. Use code DIRECTOR when signing up to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, it's been a difficult week, man. I'm not gonna lie. It's my first appearance since the Chargers season officially came to a close last Saturday, losing in the wild card round to the Houston Texans. I don't know, man. I still feel like I haven't quite come out of it. How are you doing, Bolt fam? Feels weird. I don't know. I'm going to try and remove myself from that for this video because, like everything, time heals all wounds. But it's also, after a few days being down in the dumps, quite honestly slumming around the house, trying to figure out what to do in my follow-up video after that game, I've come to some, revelations on the season. Some conclusions I want to make on the season. And some declarations I want to make in terms of how I feel now that the Chargers 2024 season's officially over. The Jim Harbaugh inaugural season is officially concluded. And how I feel coming out the other end of it now, man. It's tough. The feelings still feel pretty raw. The loss was pretty unspectacular. It's something that, it's going to be difficult for a lot of us to shake off and let the dust settle and start seeing clearly again. But I think it's important, and we're going to go over it today. My season grades for the 2024 season, from coaching to each position, and followed up by what we need going into the future. It's officially draft season, right? That can be very exciting. I think we have a lot of good pieces to build on, man. Should be very interesting. Before we do kick things off, man, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog. Use code DIRECTOR to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Newcomers, take a look at the Patrick Mahomes free pick for this weekend. I got a whole bunch of picks on here. If you guys want to pause and take a look at some of these, if you want to coattail with some of what I'm going to be throwing down for this weekend, they got this pretty cool thing called Split the Pot going on right now. I don't know if it's currently still live, but definitely something worth checking out if you guys want to make the postseason more interesting and more watchable, palatable, in my opinion, now that the Charger season's officially concluded. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action.
Who's got it better than us?
The Chargers 2024 official and final season grades by the Director. Trying to, again, put aside the trauma that was experienced by Chargers fans on Saturday and try and get a new perspective as to how we can start building for the 2025 season. Where my stakes are realistically now, like my emotions and my expectations, where are they now after what we experienced in 2024? Where do I see the team going? How do they perform this season? And then a light touch up on the tail end of the video on some of our needs and where we can find them. Let's go ahead and start things off here with the GM. You see the big man right there. Joe Ortiz, new general manager for the Chargers in 2024. This is a pretty big move, man. I think this is a move that, as I was coming off of that, Texans game, and as I was feeling all the emotions I was feeling about, the loss and the season officially being over, because let's be clear, man, I wasn't done with y'all. I wanted one more game, one more broadcast, one more hurrah with Justin Herbert in the gang, and we did not get it. But as I was reflecting past that, I started thinking about some of the massive improvements that we've made in the season. In particular, what happened earlier in the offseason, because I feel like there's been a lot of time since then, and maybe some of us have forgotten just how good of an offseason the Chargers really had in 2024, man. It was spectacular. And this was coming off of a pretty terrible situation for Joe Ortiz to navigate, if you'll remember. You guys remember what was going on at the top of the offseason this last year? The Chargers, maybe a bit of a money issue. You know, the cap was super, super tight for the team. We had all these giant contracts to aging vets that needed to be, you know, taken care of. There's a whole lot of needs on the roster. You had this new Jim Harbaugh identity that you were trying to build with the minimum resources available. It was a tough job for a guy like Joe Ortiz to step into and try and make work for the 2024 season. Now, at the time, a lot of these signings, they felt like, meh, you know, we'll see what happens. He's doing the best with what he's got. We don't have a lot of money to make a big move in terms of free agency, right? Well, hindsight's 2020, because a lot of those moves turned out to be spectacular budget beast moves for the Chargers. Can you even fathom? I can't even fathom the ability of Joe Ortiz to go out and, let's say, scout the free agent pool, recognize the talent that's not still, you know, maybe it's simmering under the surface. They haven't had a good season in a while. They're either an aging vet or a disappointing, you know, former first-round pick, or, you know, a potential player that didn't quite live up to those expectations. And he brought him into the Chargers, knowing very well that the Chargers coaching staff and environment and the team that they're building would unearth a lot of hidden potential in these guys, bring them a lot of success that a lot were expecting from them earlier in former first-round picks, aging vets, turning back the clock, right? Bringing guys out of retirement like Tony Jefferson, and helping guys that maybe were struggling to find a home like Thierry Tart, who had some, we'll say, personality and issues like that kept him away from very many teams, even though he was a pretty good player. The Chargers found a way. That already is spectacular. GMs that are able to do that, able to take a talent and bring them in for the season as a successful budget option, that's already crazy. You see that with some of the best teams in the NFL. And it's one thing that I never thought as a Chargers fan I would see. Chargers for the longest time have kind of been signing nobodies. We kind of went all in a little bit with the Brandon Staley era. We got a couple of really good guys like Khalil Mack, one of the great Chargers now of all time. We also had some pretty epic busts like J.C. Jackson. This time around, Joe Ortiz got us some awesome players to start the build of the Jim Harbaugh era without risking the entire future to make it happen. And boy, I'm going to say, man, as far as free agency goes, that's like a solid, like, A- for me, A even. Like, the stuff that he pulled off, you don't see very often. Even signings that weren't, like, spectacular, like Christian Fulton. I thought that was a weird signing. I didn't have a lot of faith in it, and it worked out okay. Think of it as like a budget Michael Davis. Like, Michael Davis was, you know, getting contracts and being paid a lot, and we got some good production out of a guy like him in Christian Fulton without breaking the bank. Very creative and very impressive first season in free agency, one that we're going to cover so much on this channel, guys. The offseason director is a very fun director to follow because I love football theory. I love roster construction. I love drafting and scouting and all that kind of stuff as a fan from that perspective. And we're going to put out a whole lot of content revolving around that. But then the big thing that happened, and I'm going to move on because I'm spending a lot of time on this, but this is a very important topic in this video that I want Chargers fans to walk away from and say, hey, like, look, the future's in good hands. Free agency was amazing. But I say that the gem of the Joe Ortiz hiring, the crown of his achievement in 2024, absolutely was the NFL draft. Forget what he did in free agency. Already impressive, right? The draft, this was one of the best drafts I've ever seen as a Los Angeles / San Diego Charger fan. Of course, there's some epic drafts back in the mid-2000s, right, that no one will ever touch. But this draft was one of the best I've seen maybe since then. You know what I mean? How crazy is it for any team in the NFL to walk away with more than 2 starters from the draft? It's pretty crazy. And the Chargers walked away with, let's see, Joe Alt, one of the best tackles in terms of rookies ever, and especially Chargers history, right? He's definitely going to be a very important building block going forward. Lad McConkey, who we traded up for, we fleeced the crap out of the Patriots to get Ladd McConkey on the roster. This was one that I was screaming for, right? I was so excited. I had the Ladd McConkey hype leading up to the draft, and it happened, and I couldn't have been happier with the results. Ladd McConkey had a spectacular season. You got hidden, potential guys like Junior Colson, Boygby, stuff like that. But then you got guys like the corners in the middle rounds. And Tarheeb Still, fantastic rookie season. Cam Hart, fantastic rookie season. Kamani Vidal, he chipped in a lot too, man. The Chargers draft was absolutely insane. And when you put it all together, the free agency, the draft, all of it, the whole enchilada, I'm going to give our GM for the 2024 season, Joe Ortiz, an A, a spectacular A. And it's been a long time, in my opinion, since the Chargers could walk away with an A season from a GM. Again, not docking Tom Telesco too much. He did some good things for this team. But this was an exceptional season by Joe Ortiz, and it makes me so pumped for what the 2025 follow-up season is going to look like now that we have money. Chargers projected, and this is, projections we're seeing everywhere, over $100 million in free agency. We're going to have some extra picks. I think we're, again, don't quote me on it, projected 10 or 11 picks thanks to the compensatory formula this man put into place. Chargers are going to have a spectacular opportunity to really double down this year and build that Jim Harbaugh squad that he's dreaming of. Speaking of which, we got to move on. Be very excited for the future under Joe Ortiz, man. We got ourselves a very special GM. Coaching for the Chargers. Now, this is stemming between, everyone from Jim Harbaugh down to Ben Herbert, the strength and conditioning coach, of course, the coordinators in Jesse Minter, who had a fantastic season despite the, hiccup towards the end of the year. Greg Roman, who a lot of people wanted to fire off the bat, right? And, of course, there were some very rocky roads on that journey for him at OC. But in the end, I think, honestly, he did okay. He did better than I expected, and I'm hoping that if the Chargers do bring him back, that we see a nice follow-up season from Greg Roman. But most importantly, Jim Harbaugh at the very top. Now, I'm kind of glad we spent a little bit of extra time on Joe Ortiz at the top because I did mention something very, very important there. And it was the free agent acquisitions and the rookies coming into the situation in Los Angeles with Jim Harbaugh, his coaching staff, the Michigan Wolverine championship staff, and finding tremendous success right away. And that is very indicative of premium coaching, elite coaching. Jim Harbaugh, the leader of it all, surrounded himself with some of the best minds in football to create an environment where players simply thrive. And you saw it everywhere, all over the roster. Sure, Justin Herbert had some ups and downs, but you saw a pretty dang good Justin Herbert for the most part of the season, right? You saw talent all over the roster from running back J.K. Dobbins, comeback player of the year, I'm saying, was it nominee or at least official consideration at this point, right? He had a fantastic year. You had the defense going crazy with guys like that, T.R. Tart, Christian Fulton, Tony Jefferson, whole bunch of talent everywhere, all over that team. And it really is impossible not to credit the coaching for the most part in making that happen. And it really does open your perspective to what's going to happen once we load up on some really good players all over the roster. Because, yeah, we still had a lot of weaknesses. And we were able to fill a lot of those needs this season with, bridge players or temporary players or players that, were able to find an identity with the Chargers that may end up sticking around. But think about the potential for the future. Think about the potential of a first-round pick in terms of a tight end for the Chargers under Jim Harbaugh. I know everyone's thinking, Colson Loveland. I mean, I'm sure he would have a great rookie season. But that's what I'm saying. Tight ends don't typically have crazy rookie seasons unless you're Sam Laporta or, the recent tight end draft classes have been pretty good. I think Jim Harbaugh gives us as good of an opportunity for something like that to happen as anybody. And it gets me very excited. As for his grade for the season, Jim Harbaugh had one job above all, and it was building a culture. You're going to go in nitpicking every game saying, he should have called a timeout here. Where's the red flag there? clock management, this and that. Those are all things that I think nitpicking is completely fine with. And I would encourage you guys to go through games and see Jim Harbaugh, the in-time, real-time coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. How does he perform? But me, I'm taking a bit of a wider perspective here, a step back and saying, hey, man, the biggest thing that this team needed coming into the season was an identity. And Jim Harbaugh passes with flying colors there, dude. The Chargers know who they are after years and years of kind of walking through a thick fog of, are we a high volume passing team? Are we a defensive team? Are we going to try and run the football? Like, what are the Chargers? Now we know who the Chargers are. And they've built a culture of winning. This is a winning culture in Los Angeles all of a sudden. And so, yeah, not everybody was perfect. Greg Roman had some ups and downs. Even Ryan Ficken at times had some ups and downs. Jesse Minter, had a few games there where it was like, what are we doing? But for the most part, this season was so spectacular in laying a foundation for the future. This season was performed to the tune of 11-6, a postseason berth, that I cannot give this coaching staff anything less than an A. It was very close to an A+ for me. It really, really was, because this is a very special season in football. The only thing I think pushes that to an A+ for me is a postseason win, which unfortunately the Chargers weren't able to make happen. So very, very confident that it will in the future. Now let's start breaking down this roster. This won't take as long as the two guys at the top, because I feel like that is definitely an important aspect of the future and what was indicative of the 2024 season, what represents 2024 season. Now let's start breaking down the roster to see where we were and where we can improve and where we're going. Okay, so for the 2024 season, Justin Herbert entering a situation where a lot of people kind of sketchy on how he would perform, what his role would be, what would the results be of a Jim Harbaugh coached football team, where the quarterback position isn't leaned on as heavily as other systems, which I guess is kind of unfair to say because every system leans on the quarterback very heavily, including the Chargers this season. But there was a lot of focus on, hey, this is a running football team now. The Chargers don't have weapons for Justin Herbert. Obviously, we're going to turn into a ground and pound squad. And honestly, it did not happen. Justin Herbert was still given the opportunity to shoulder this season, their wins, their success. And for the most part, he did fantastic this year. Everybody's going to push back on this a little bit because of what happened on Saturday. And that I put into consideration when handing out this grade. Where it really mattered, Justin Herbert, he did crumble. And he does deserve a lot of blame for that playoff collapse on Saturday. That was tough to watch. And it's tougher to admit as a Chargers fan who is just so, obsessed with what Justin Herbert is and how, premium of a talent I believe him to be. He blew it. He did. But we got to separate ourselves from that for a second and look at the season as a whole and say, hey, dude, this is the same quarterback that only threw 3 interceptions the entire year. Everyone's going to forget about that because he threw 4 in that game. But he's still like one of the cleanest cornerbacks you're going to see in the season. He was constantly winning games for the Chargers, constantly shouldering the offense and carrying, the load on his back. It was another tough season for Justin Herbert due to some lack of talent at weapons and offensive line still needs to be completed in terms of that build. But there's no doubt in my mind that Justin Herbert is still a top tier quarterback in the NFL. The Chargers need to find a way to build a team around him that thrives in the postseason. Maybe Justin Herbert needs some sort of mental, eureka, mental, revelation to get past that point in the playoffs. Maybe it is something that he needs to figure out. But for the most part, you can help your quarterback doing that by surrounding him with more weapons, more protection, more confidence. And I think we're on our way to that. As a season as a whole, I think Justin Herbert, quarterback, I'm going to give him an A-. Some people may disagree with that. I would not push back on a B+ too much. I was kind of teetering on that one. But in the end, Justin Herbert was just too efficient of a quarterback, very protective of the football, and did help the Chargers result in an 11-win season, which, coming from a 5-win season, very, very impressive. Moving on to the running back. J.K. Dobbins, great story for the season, right? Great story for the season. Struggled with the Baltimore Ravens to stay healthy. I would say when he was on the field, he was fantastic. But couldn't stay on the field, and he was kind of labeled as someone not to add to a roster because of his unavailability. Well, the Chargers helped him prove, for the most part, the world wrong, that he's still a premium running back. He just needed an opportunity. And for a large majority of the season, he was that. We got to see J.K. Dobbins really help the offense thrive when he was on the football field, especially in the first half of the season. The offense, it really felt like it could get going behind his efforts and his talent. And I think largely, that was a very good signing, and one that I'm kind of hoping does stick around. We'll have to wait and see what the Chargers decide to do with the epic class of running back coming up in 2025. But J.K. Dobbins, very good signing. Gus Edwards behind him, decent signing. Maybe not RB1 like a lot of us thought he was going to be, but a very good complementary piece to J.K. Dobbins. Very good, thunder to the lightning that we needed on that at that position. Hassan Haskins ended up being a solid signing. Kamani Vidal has a lot of potential going into the future. Chargers, I would say, more or less look good. Not great, not epic, but good at running back. It's a position I think does need to be elevated, does need that great and elite talent at some point. But for this season, it was definitely very manageable. And I'm going to say running back gets a B for me. It's something that, I'm going to expect that position to improve. But it was a very good combo for this season in building the Jim Harbaugh identity. Next up, wide receiver. This is the big one, man. A lot of Chargers fans are going to tell me, hey, this is the one that gets an F, F minus. Chargers need more weapons. Herbert, he has nobody to throw to out there. Well, right off the bat, I'm going to say this is a C plus for me, and it's mainly because of Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey was such a slam dunk pick by this team. Anything less than a C plus feels wrong to me. And yeah, you got to say that there are some efforts by Quentin Johnston that are commendable as well. He had, I would say, an okay season. Not good, not great, but okay. He had an okay season. The stats would say otherwise. He ended up with 700 or 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. He had a really good follow-up season to what was a very disappointing rookie year. But past Ladd McConkey, though, at this point, it feels like the Chargers really don't have anybody. And that was very much so spelled out for us in that game versus Houston, where the Chargers' weapons ended the game with Ladd McConkey 200 yards and a touchdown, and the next best guy had 2 catches for 15 yards. The rest of the wide receivers that game, and there was 4 other guys that caught balls, totaled 45 yards. Justin Herbert ended that day with 240, 250 yards. Ladd McConkey was responsible for 200 of those yards, and that is hilarious. You cannot do that. As great as Ladd McConkey is, and as wide receiver 1 as he is for this team going forward, he needs help. The Chargers need to add weapons, and that's an obvious big need for the team going forward. So I'm going to give the wide receiver position a grade of a C+. Ladd McConkey mainly being the one that carries that above a F or a D. But very, very bright hope for the future to help build around his talent, man. There's a lot of potential for the Chargers to make some big moves this offseason to help Ladd McConkey out. Now, I'm starting to think, I'll end it on this one, go on to the next position. I'm starting to think the Chargers might not need a guy like T. Higgins to be wide receiver 1 for this team. I think we got a wide receiver 1. Maybe we need to get a really capable wide receiver 2. We'll say more reliable than Quentin Johnson. Quentin Johnson can be a big play guy, but we need a very reliable, high ceiling wide receiver 2 to complement our wide receiver 1. And I'm going to say a tight end's probably better. And in terms of more important, in my opinion, in terms of if you want to spend some money, let's get a tight end on this roster. Anyway, let's move on to the next position, offensive line. I wanted so badly to split this up into 2 categories, interior offensive line and tackle, because there's 2 completely different stories being told here, but I'm going to squish them into one because we're running out of time. Chargers offensive line this year is going to get a B. And it's strictly because of the tackles that we had this year that it is a B. Joe Alt, one of the best rookie tackles the NFL has ever seen. One of the best tackles the Chargers organization has ever seen. We drafted a superstar. Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh, they knew what the heck they were doing, and we're going to have a fantastic bookend situation at tackle for the next several seasons. Rashawn Slater, we already knew. Pro Bowl, caliber tackle. Joe Alt, welcome to the NFL, man. He's going to thrive. He's going to be a superstar going forward. That's going to elevate this grade to an A+, right? And then you got the interior offensive line. Ooh, is that going to drag it down? Is that going to drag it down a whole lot? Down a full letter grade and then some. Center for me was a very important position for this team to get right. And although I don't know, it feels like the team loves him. the league. He was nominated as an alternate for the Pro Bowl, right? Like that was kind of surprising to me. It feels like the team likes Bradley Bozeman, but it just does not feel like the right fit, at least right now. And we'll see what the Chargers decide to do. Maybe he'll stay with the team for another year or two, but that situation could improve. The guard situation, though, man, we have got to figure that out right away. If this wants to be a run football team, and center is very important for this too, but if you want to be a running football team, you've got to elevate that guard position. Trey Pipkins, I'm sorry, that experiment did not work. Zion Johnson, former first-round pick, man, that situation ain't working either. The Chargers' interior offensive line was so bad that it feels like every single time Justin Herbert was getting sacked, it was from the interior. And it happened frequently. That lost us some football games. That unit of the interior offensive line lost us some football games. That is a huge point of emphasis for me at the end of the season. Interior offensive line must be addressed. Another weapon for the Chargers, tight end. Like I alluded to just a moment ago, the Chargers, I feel like, would be so wise to get a stud tight end this offseason. And funny enough, you can draft one, right? I'm not going to say you shouldn't. The Chargers 100% should draft a tight end. Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, those guys absolutely would thrive with this team, even in their rookie seasons, right? But I'm definitely not opposed to grabbing a good veteran tight end either. Like, or even trade for a high ceiling tight end. I know we talk about, Pitts every year, or we talked a little about Mark Andrews and those kinds of tight ends. I absolutely would say, hey, let's go after one. Chargers would benefit, and Justin Herbert specifically would benefit so much from a safety valve or a safety blanket tight end on this offense, a sure-handed big target. Like, that screams Justin Herbert. We need to get one of those on the team right away. I would say that's even more important than wide receiver in a lot of aspects. And for that, I'm going to say Will Dissly, who was kind of thrust into that receiving tight end role pretty early in the season. He did an okay job. He did, very good for what we were asking, because he was supposed to be the blocking tight end for this team, tight end 2. The guy to help set the edge, the guy to help, in the run game. And although he was still very good at that, the Chargers need a guy that can be a threat at tight end, and we need to go get one, period. Like, that's one of the biggest things I need the Chargers to check off my list. In building the team with that many resources, tight end is definitely one of the ones I'm kind of requiring as a fan to say, hey, we got to go get one. We got to get one this season. So I'm going to give the position a C. Hayden Hurst, not a great season for him. Will Dissly, commendable, but not what we needed for him. We need him to be the tight end 2, the blocking option, which he's a great blocking option. I want him to stay on the team, but we need a tight end 1. Okay, moving on over to the defense, and we'll be quick. I know this video is getting a little long. Defensive line, surprising for me. I thought the defensive line would end up being one of the weakest points of this team this season. Jesse Minter proved me wrong on very many positions for this team in the way that they coached up their players. And one of the stars that we didn't mention at the top of the video with the GM and the moves that he made, Poona Ford. What a season he had, man. Oh, that interior was clicking when Poona Ford was on tempo, right? Morgan Fox had a decent season. You had guys up and down, Tito and et cetera. But, it feels like Poona Ford, very spectacular free agent signing at the earlier part of the season, ends up being a huge steal and a huge stud for the year. And largely part the reason why I think the Chargers defensive line had a really good piece to kind of, work behind. So defensive line, I'm going to say B, very solid. They ended up, a top pass defense, contributing factor, but a middle of the pack run defense, which if you guys remember, the Chargers run defense was putrid before this season. Largely in due part to the effort of the guys in the interior of the defensive line. Very important part to stopping the run, and they did a great job at improving that stat. So B for me for the defensive line. What about edge? High expectations for edge position this year because of course, how many resources were behind it. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack on the top. Both these guys taking pay cuts to stay with the team. We all expected big season from them. Didn't quite happen. I'll be honest. Didn't quite happen. Khalil Mack ended with 6 sacks? Joey Bosa with 4 or 5? I don't remember. I should have done that before doing this video. But could have been a better season for both of them. It really could have. Now, Khalil Mack still a game wrecker. Sacks don't always paint the full picture. I would say Khalil Mack kind of immune to that for me. Khalil Mack had a great season. Joey Bosa, largely due to injury, did not. What about the guys rotating behind him, though, where the real resources were put in? Tuli Tuipulotu. I think he ended up leading the team, right? With like 8 sacks or something like that. Bravo. And a lot of people will say, hey, he disappeared. Where did he go? He was rotating. And he's likely going to see a starting role this season with the whole Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack situation kind of up in the air now. But Dupree got in there for a nice handful of sacks, too. Was it like 6 or 7, something like that, too? Yeah, man. The Chargers would end as a top 10 sacking team in the NFL. And I would say that was a huge part of the defense and why it worked with Jesse Minter and why the Chargers put that many resources into the position. They needed consistent pressure. They needed, above average or elite pressure at times, and they got it. As some would say the stats are maybe mediocre, I don't think they are. I think the Chargers ended with a really good stat line. I think that it was very obvious when you're watching the games live the impact the edge position was having on the team and why the defense was clicking and forcing mistakes and turning over the quarterback and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm going to give the position A-. A lot of people may disagree with me. I think that they did exactly what they were designed to do. Be consistent, be unrelenting, and be fresh as much as possible. And it feels like for the large part of the season, that was successful outside of Joey Bosa. All right. Next up, linebacker. Dude, this season was weird because, again, like very many seasons previous with Drew Tranquill and Kaiser White and all these guys, our best linebacker, hit the road, and we didn't know where we were going to be. At the top of the year, I would have told you, hey, if the Chargers end with a B grade, it's going to be because of Junior Colson. Junior Colson had a rookie year. He not present for some of it due to injury. But the guy that really stepped in was year 2 player in Dayan Henley. Dayan Henley ended as maybe one of the best linebackers in football. Isn't that crazy? Only logging 1 interception, but very good in coverage. Very good in coverage. Very solid tackler. Very good versus the run. I mean, all around, Dayan Henley, my goodness, have a season. Very impressed with him. And the Chargers made, the other, options at linebacker work. At times, the position may be a little bit thin, but Dan Henley, spectacular season. Biggest reason why they have a B for me. And the Chargers have a star going forward. I think his follow-up season is going to be even better in 2025. What about cornerback? This was the position where I was like, dude, we got an F. We don't got anybody. Outside of Asante Samuel Jr. at the top of the season, I was like, I don't know what we're going to do. Well, lo and behold, Asante Samuel goes down early. You guys are wondering what the mystery is there. It sounds like he had an injury since birth that he had flare up during the year, and he was sidelined for most of the season, or the entire season, because of it, but still wants to return to the Chargers. We don't know any details besides that. We'll look more into it as the offseason progresses. But then, something magical happened. The Chargers rookie class went nuts. Highlighted by Tarheeb Still. Maybe one of the best rookie corners of this class. Chargers got him in the middle rounds. Cam Hart, fantastic perimeter corner. Christian Fulton, great free agent acquisition. Jasir Taylor, maybe a kind of a down year for him, but the corner, man, all of a sudden, how bright is that position looking behind those 2 studs, rookie studs from this season? Very good. Very, very good season. So much so, I'm going to say, like, what I thought was going to be an F turned out to be a B. Like, this secondary was so good. We got so many turnovers. The coverage was so tight. It ended, or helped in a large due part, ended the season for the Chargers as the top scoring defense in football. That is not an easy thing to do. And it's in large part due to the efforts of the secondary. These guys, absolutely fantastic, led by none other Derwin James, safety position. So the corner position, I'm going to give a B. Solid B. It could be even higher. But the safety position, I think, also extremely important. Maybe a big reason why everybody was clicking so hard. Derwin James became that leader that we were all expecting of him, right? He had a couple of seasons where it was like, oh, Derwin James, right? He's seeing some decline. This year, he proved everybody wrong. Pro Bowl, caliber performance this season, leading his men to victory. I called them Derwin's dogs all season long, man. Derwin felt like the captain of this ship that was the secondary, and these guys were firing all cannons every single game, man. And boy, was it so much fun to watch. Derwin James is one of the funnest defensive players in the NFL to watch. And not a lot of people love watching defense. I think everybody's, leaning towards offense and the big plays that they can produce, but the defense, man, were they clicking behind Derwin James this year. Sure, you could have seen some better play from the opposite safety and maybe some of the backup safeties, even though they did a great too. I loved, Tony Jefferson, Alohi Gilman, maybe not as great of a start to the year, but he ended very, very strong. I'm still going to give the position like an A-. Heck, I got to give it an A, man. Derwin James is too good. I'm going to change my grade right here. I'm going to give it an A. We're going to go from an A- to an A right now because Derwin James is that special of a player, and he had that special of a season. Finally, special teams to round out this video. Cameron Dicker. We got one of the good ones. I didn't get a new picture. He's still 15. Should be 11. Cameron Dicker, one of the best kickers in the NFL. Chargers got themselves a good one after so many seasons. And the history of this team with bad kicking, it is really nice to have an automatic kicker on this squad. And he probably scored a heck of a ton of points for this team this year. As for the other aspects of it, the coverage guys and the returner and Darius Davis, or I should say the return guys, everyone did pretty good. Not the best season. Ryan Ficken created a very awesome special teams unit for this team a few years ago. Maybe not their best year, but definitely a strong year for the Chargers special team position. I'm going to give them a B+ on the year, which finally leads me to how do I feel about the season as a whole for the Chargers? Now with the season behind us, the results that we saw, the ups, the downs, the smiles, the frowns. How do I feel about the 2024 Los Angeles Chargers? I'm giving this season a grade of a B+. Largely because of the way the Chargers lost in the postseason. I'm going to say it should have probably been an A-, given how drastic of a turnaround this season was for the team. A 5-win to 11 team, huge. 5th seed, playoff berth, huge. Lots and lots of value all over the roster. Huge. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we faced a playoff caliber team in the AFC wild card and got squashed. That's going to bring the grade down a little bit. Fortunately for us, though, a B+ is a whole lot better than what we were last season. Last year, Chargers, 5 wins. I don't remember what the grade is that I gave out, but I'm sure it was something like a C- even. Like, it was a bad year. It was a very bad year for the Chargers. And for us to climb that drastically is huge. And we have a lot of more climbing to do, man. This is just year one in the Jim Harbaugh season. But a lot of people get mad at me when I say, hey, it's a rebuild season. The Chargers did really good. The future is bright because, yeah, we did collapse in a game that really mattered. But in recognizing that happened, we also have to recognize the improvement. And when you put the facts down, you put the numbers in and you plug in all the data, statistically, the Chargers are so much better. And as a fan with eyeballs, I can tell you this team is so much better and heading towards a bright future. If you guys are wondering where we are right now, the Chargers, again, $100 million projected, even over that, in cap space for the season. Officially at position number 22 in the upcoming 2025 NFL draft, which there's going to be some studs there, man. You may see Ashton Jeanty there. You may see a tight end come off the board there. You may see a nice defensive lineman, whatever. I think the Chargers are going to be looking at maybe a value at tight end around that pick, running back. If Ashton is still there, which I don't think so, but who knows at this point, right? Who knows? 22 is not a bad number. And we got a lot of picks going into the season. Some of the, per what I just did on this video as well. If you guys are wondering, okay, what are we looking at? What are we doing with that pick and the rest of the draft going forward? What the Chargers do need, based on the grades that I handed out today, the number one need for this team, in my opinion, is interior offensive line. That unit was bad. Of course, the offensive line as a whole got a B. The interior offensive line probably for me would have gotten a D+. It was bad this year, maybe even a D. Bradley Bozeman at times wasn't bad, but for the most part, that unit was really bad. We need interior offensive line. We need tight end, actually, was the next position. I say, hey, we got to go get one. We got to get one from Justin Herbert and this offense to click. Wide receiver was the next one for me, and then defensive line. There is a lot that can happen. A lot of good players. I still think running back could be a position that surprises us as a big need for this team and one that is going to have a lot of options to choose from in this draft class. Guys, this may be the best running back class I have ever seen. And just so happens we're a running football team that is maybe in need of a stud, or I should say even star running back. We have a stud in J.K. Dobbins. I think we can get a caliber in Saquon Barkley out of this draft class. It is very impressive. Have to wait and see. Future's bright, Bolt fam. I wanted to make sure that this follow-up video was very honest and forward with you guys, that right off the cuff you knew that I'm still not very happy with the way the season ended. That I've been struggling as a Chargers fan to poke my head back up and say, hey, Kyoto, we're coming back for another video. But it's important that we try and come out the other side and realize just how privileged we are as Chargers fans to see the kind of season that we did. This season was special. And this season was a huge turnaround from the season previous. And although our expectations as fans are high, the reality of the situation is we are headed towards a very, very bright future behind Jim Harbaugh. I know we all feel that every single season. We fall short, this and that. But honestly, it feels like since that loss to the Raiders, the 63-21 loss, and the possibility of getting Jim Harbaugh, it feels like since then, we could only go up. And boy, did we go up this season. And boy, does the future look like we're about to skyrocket in the next couple of years. Look for the Chargers to be Super Bowl contenders between the years 2025 and 2027, man. I have a very, very strong and confident opinion of that. And gets me very excited to cover the offseason with you guys. It's going to be a fun one. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Thank you for listening to my ramblings on my beloved Chargers, which even when I'm upset, are always over my heart. And I'm very excited to cover this offseason with you guys. It's going to be a spectacular offseason full of so many different possibilities, so many resources to pull off these moves, and a bright future that really understands where it's headed in terms of direction behind Jim Harbaugh. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. We'll catch you next time. And as always, bolt up, stay frosty, and hold your head up high, Bolt fam. We about to become a big deal in the NFL going forward, man. Let's go. Who's got it better than us? Nobody.